Hello. Hey, hello Jessica. Hello Judith. Hello Faye. Hello Audi. Hello Marcelo. Yay, good morning. Hello Edu from West One. Just write it down here. Lesson 3. Writing. All right, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello from the future. How are you guys doing today? Are you guys all right? Hello, Roger. Hello, Anna. Hello, George. Hello, Natalia. Hello, G. Hello, Solange. How are you guys today? Are you okay? Hello, Cynthia. Hello, Anderson. All right. Yay, let me know how you guys going. Good morning, Carol. Hello, Alice. I'm trying to say your English names, like Alice. It's funny because even like for easy names in English, let me just stop the music. Even for easy names, sometimes in English, people can make it really complicated. So it's like my name is Aline, right? So it's really hard for them to get my name right. Like they never get my name right. It's always like Aline. Aline, I think it's the most common one, Aline. And then sometimes they say Aline. Sometimes they just don't know what to say. Sometimes when I say Aline and they have to write, they write with I at the end instead of an E. So they say Aline, like Italian, probably. Yeah, so let me know how you guys doing. Today is our lesson number 3 of the English Confidence Week. So let me know if you guys are following the sessions. Hello, Pedro. I always say PH, but I never know your first name. So now I know it's Pedro. So every time now I'm going to say hello to Pedro. Hello, William. Hello, Sarah. Yay, awesome. So let me know if you guys are following the sessions, if you guys are watching every day, or if you guys are here for the first time today for lesson number 3. Today we're going to talk about writing. And then I want to start, I love the comments, so feel free to comment like the whole session because that's how we can interact. I love interaction. So sometimes if you guys are not commenting or doing anything, I just don't know if you are still there. So please feel free to send me comments, to put little hearts, to ask me questions, whatever you want to do. And today we're going to talk about writing. So writing in English. So how can you improve your English writing? And before we start talking about writing, I want to know, what do you think is the most difficult thing about writing in English? So if I know what's your main issue, I can help you to work on that, okay? I got a little bit of allergy on my eye as well, so that means I've been eating a lot of cheese, which I'm not supposed to. So if you see like there's a little bit of water, I'm not crying, okay? It's just my allergy today. So Kayo is saying it's his first time here. Hello, Kayo, and welcome. This is the 3rd lesson, so this is the lesson number 3 of the English Confidence Week. So since last Wednesday, every day I come here at the same time at 9:17 in the morning Sydney time to talk about a different topic to help you guys to feel more comfortable and confident with your English. So every day I bring some concepts and strategies from neuroscience to help you to feel more confident with your English. So on Wednesday we talked about listening. Yesterday we talked about reading, and then today we're gonna talk about writing, okay? My idea here, it's not to teach you English itself, so I'm not gonna explain like verbs, I'm not gonna explain like grammar concepts, like anything like that, because there is enough good content out there to teach you the English structure. My goal here with these lessons is to use neuroscience to help you with your English confidence, okay? So for everyone who are studying English, who is actually studying English at the moment, or everyone who's studied English before, and you feel stuck, you feel like you're not improving your English anymore, you feel like you learn English, but you don't feel comfortable to apply and to use the English that you learn in real life situations, okay? So everything that I do here, it's based on that. And then today I'm gonna give you guys some tips, techniques, and strategies to improve your writing. So when we talk about writing, writing is much more than writing texts, than writing essays, right? Because sometimes we think about writing like a huge monster. We think about exams. We think about, for example, like about IELTS, or we think about like Cambridge exams or something like that. And that's not the goal, right? Like, of course, sometimes we need to improve our writing to take this type of text, these types of tests, but writing is much more than that. If we think about writing in your daily life, what are the writing activities that you actually have to do and you struggle to do them? For example, do you have to write emails at work? Or do you have to write a cover letter to apply for a job? Or do you have to write text messages in English and you keep using the translator? So what types of writing do you guys have to do? And what types of writing do you struggle doing? So text me on the comments and let me know what's your main issue about writing in English. And then I can actually cover that during the session. So are we saying English every day? My first time here, Kaya said. Isa is saying sorry. Okay, but I don't know sorry for what. That's fine, whatever it is. Yeah, so Aline is saying that emails are the main topic for her. Let me know what else you guys are struggling to write, and then we can cover. And I'm having my coffee number 2. And I'm spilling my coffee as well. So why am I doing this? Just get a tissue. All right. So when we talk about writing, and I just spilled my coffee, if you guys, have you seen that? I do that very often, actually. I have coffee everywhere. I got too excited about my coffee number 2 because I woke up so early this morning. All right, so William is saying technical text, scientific paper. Patty is saying SMS, informal, like text message. We have very, very different ideas here. We're going from text message to scientific papers. Natalia is saying the main issue for her is not translate from Portuguese to sound more natural in English. Yeah, that's a hard thing to do as well. When you have to write formal and informal. All right, so let's get it started. I can have some idea. Let's cover academic ones. All right, so when we think about writing, step number 1 to improve your writing, know what you have to write, right? So we've been talking about it in the listening session and in the reading session as well. So the first thing, before you start studying and before you start practicing about writing, you have to think about what is your goal. Because if you want to improve your emails, if you want to improve your writing for work, if you want to go for more academic writing, that's something different from writing daily life situations, right? To write like a journal or to write some text messages. So we're talking about different goals and different types of writing. Then second thing that you have to think about before you write something is what type of language you need to use, right? So we usually have this in English and in many other languages as well. I can use Korean as an example. So if you've ever met a Korean before, or if you've ever had a contact with Korean language, if you've ever tried to learn Korean before, they usually ask the age of the person. This is not being like unpolite. For me as a Brazilian, it's being like rude to ask for the age. But in Korean, it's normal. They meet someone and they ask for their age, because once they know the age of the person, they can change their words, they can change the way of their conversation according to the age of the person. So if the person is younger, they say something different than if the person is older. So they have this in the language. And I like to compare that with formal and informal writing and speaking as well. So of course, like, even if you think about speaking, if you are talking to your friends, if you are in a more friendly environment, if you are just like hanging out, of course you're gonna use more informal English to speak, right? But if you are in a workplace, if you are in a meeting, if you are talking to your manager, for example, you're gonna use more formal types of English, okay? So when we think about writing, writing is the same thing. If you are studying for an exam, an English exam, or if you are studying for more academic writing, there are some specific types of structure and vocabulary that you have to use. And then I highly recommend you guys to study them in a specific manner. So for example, if you are studying academic writing, you should definitely search, for example, the different types of writing, the different texts. For example, is it an essay? Is that, for example, describing something? So there are some specific vocabularies to describe some graphs, for example. If you are in the scientific, if you are in the scientific area, for example, I just saw Fernanda just join us. Hello, Fernanda. Fernanda is one of my students, and she's a researcher. So when you are doing some research and you are working with that in a scientific way, there are some specific ways of writing. There are some specific ways that people expect you to write that. So I would say the best way to start doing that, if you've never done it before, is to actually do some research about the different types of writing, like different types of documents, and get some templates. So templates definitely help, okay? Because it really depends on what type of document you are writing. It changes the way you're gonna do it. So for example, if I am working in a company and I am participating on a meeting and I have to write the meeting minutes, which is like the summary of everything that they say in the meeting and all the actions, all the to-do list and the deadlines. If I am the person doing that, I have like a template to follow, right? So there is a structure for that type of document, which is different of writing a scientific paper. For example, if I'm writing a scientific paper, there are some parts in the scientific paper, there is like a structure behind that I need to follow. If I am writing an email, even if you think about the email, there is like a structure, there is like an order, the minimum of the information that you have to add on your email, okay? So first thing is knowing what you have to write. And then you can get some templates and you can get some examples of how to do that, okay? And then I would say after you decide the type of documents that you need to improve your writing on, it's important to check the type of vocabulary. So for example, I used to work with IT before, and vocabulary is very specific for every person. So I used to work with IT before. So if I have to write some IT documentation, I can do that because that's part of something that I used to work with, okay? But imagine that if I've never worked with IT before, and then here in Australia, someone asked me to write like some documentation for IT. I am going to struggle. And I am going to struggle not even because of the English language, but because I've never written that type of document before, okay? So it's very important that we actually separate these two things. We have to separate the expectation. If we actually have an English issue, if we have like English limitation, or if we have the documentation limitation, right? Because if we are doing something for the first time, it's normal that you're gonna struggle a little bit more because you are learning how to do something. And then you are learning that in English already, okay? So if you're thinking about academic writing, if you're thinking about, for example, going for like a master's degree in another country, or if you're thinking about going for like a PhD in English and you are struggling with writing, have you ever done that before? Like, are you used to do that in your first language? So are you sure this is like an English limitation, or it's just because you are learning something new, like you are doing something for the first time, and then you just get frustrated and then you put everything on the poor English language, right? Like, oh, this language is so hard, I'll never be able to do that. So if I think, for example, one of my dreams is to actually go for like a master's degree in neurolanguage, or even like a PhD in the future. And I've never been in that place, even in my first language in Portuguese. So I think if I go for a PhD, if I go for like a very academic writing situation, even in my first language, I am going to struggle, right? Because I'm gonna be doing something for the first time. So if I'm doing that in English, I know it's gonna be hard because I'm doing that for the first time. So I need to search for templates. I need to search for structures, for chunks, for blocks of information that I have to write, and then I can start practicing. Okay. And then something that really helps when we actually have to write something is a lot of reading. So yesterday we talked about reading, and it was not a mistake that the reading lesson was before the writing lesson. It's because the more vocabulary you have, the easier it gets when you have to write something. So if you need to write more scientific documents, more academic topics, what kind of content have you been reading? Right? Because if you have to write articles and you are reading something not related, this reading, it's not gonna help you with what you have to do. So when we think about the English language, we're not doing things separately. We're not really doing like, oh, now I'm gonna practice only my listening. Now I'm gonna practice only my reading, and now I'm gonna practice only my writing. No, when we think about the English language, everything is connected. We split in different parts just to make things easier, right? But if you have to write, if I have to write, for example, IT documentation, I have to read articles and books and content and do some research about IT documentation, right? Because this is the type of vocabulary that I have to learn. If I have to write IT documentation and I am reading like some fantasy fiction books just for fun, of course it's gonna help me somehow, but it's not gonna help me with the specific vocabulary that I need to write what I need to write. Does it make sense? And when we talk about writing, writing is an output. So yesterday we talked about inputs and outputs. If you missed the live yesterday, I saved it on my IGTV, so you can watch it after. So we talked about inputs, which is all the information that we put inside our heads. And then we talked about outputs, which is the information that we actually have to produce. So when we talk about writing, it's a productive activity. So it's an output. So we have to get all the knowledge that we have, and we have to put it on the paper or on the computer. And remember that we usually remember only 10% of the information that we learn and the information that we study. So if you want to write a lot, if you have to write like some scientific papers or like some documents, which is like 10, 20, 30, 50 pages, you have to read a lot. You have to listen to a lot of content. This way you can learn more vocabulary, okay? So that's something that really helps. So step number 1 is choose your goal. So choose what type of document you have to write and check some templates to get more familiar with that. Step number 2, I would say reading. So the more you need to write, the more you need to read, right? So you need to read and read something specifically for that vocabulary, okay? And then if you are talking about emails and text messages, it's a little bit easier, I would say, because the vocabulary is a little bit more informal and the vocabulary is a little bit simple, I would say. It's like more short texts, okay? So my step number 3 is do not translate. I've been talking about it for 3 days. I'm gonna repeat it every single day. Like translating is not an option, because I know sometimes we just want to be quick, and then if someone texts us in English, we read the message, we understand the message, but then when we have to reply, we write it on Google Translator, and then we just copy and paste. This is so bad. Like, this is not gonna help. It helps you to be fast at that moment, but it definitely doesn't help you to learn English and to get more comfortable and confident with your English. Because when you translate, you're not making any effort. Google is making all the work for you. And this is not helping you to learn at all. You're just doing like the lazy mode. And if you want to do that, if you just want to do the quick, easy, lazy mode, that's up to you. Like, if you find it easy, just go for it. But just be conscious that you are not learning, that you are not improving your English if you are only doing that, okay? So oh, Aline, but so I cannot use translator like never ever in my life. Of course you can. Like, you are adult, you can do whatever you want to, just get the consequences of it, right? So if you are not so sure about your message and you still want to use the translator, what can I tell you? You can, for example, you can write the message in English, even if you still only have like more simple words, that's fine. Just write down the message in English, and then you copy your English message in the translator, and then you just check. Okay, so you are not writing in your language, translating it and copying it. You are writing it in English, you are making some effort. It's gonna take a little bit more of time, but you are writing that in English, and then you can copy and paste in the translator just to check if you wrote something wrong or if something doesn't make sense, okay? But in this case, you are using the translator just to check. You are not using it because you are lazy, okay? So in this way, you are actually learning because you're forcing your brain to write the message. So you are actually using your vocabulary, exercising your memory and all of that, okay? And then something else about vocabulary. I didn't want to do like a lesson about vocabulary because vocabulary is inside all the lessons. So every day I'm gonna end up talking about vocabulary anyway. So there is something about vocabulary that some people just tell me like, oh, but my memory is not good. How many of you think your memory is not good? My memory is not awesome, but it's a little bit good. I'll drink more coffee and I'll try not to spill coffee on myself this time. So I hear that a lot, like, oh, my memory is not good. Like, I keep forgetting the words and blah, 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 blah. So there is no such a thing like a bad memory. Memory, it's something that you exercise. Just like the body, the same way we exercise the body, we go to the gym, or maybe like we go for a walk, we exercise at the park, we go like to CrossFit, whatever you want to do. Like the same way you exercise your body, you need to exercise your mind. So the more you exercise your memory, the better your memory gets. Okay, so there is no such a thing like a bad memory or like a good memory. What exists is like a trained brain, like a trained memory, and a non-trained memory. So what you have to do, if you want to remember the words, if you want to have more vocabulary, you need to repeat and you need to practice that vocabulary that you're learning, right? So if you wanted to remember the vocabulary in order to write something, you need to read and write and read and write. Because writing, it's not something that we do all the time. And that's why it's so hard, because it's not something that we practice every day, right? So when we have to take like an exam or something like that, writing gets really hard because we don't do that every day, okay? I'll give you another example. Fernanda, she just comment here, my student, she's a researcher. So Fernanda, excuse me because I'm gonna use you as an example for the live. But Fernanda, as a scientist, she's really good at writing. Like she writes scientific papers every single day, like week, month. Like this is her life. This is what she's been practicing for many years, right? Because she's getting better. She's good at it because she's been doing this. She's been practicing this for a while. On the other hand, she had some issues on speaking because as a scientist, she writes more than she speaks. So naturally, her writing is gonna get better because she's been spending more effort and hours in writing than speaking, okay? So the place where you put your attention, the place where you put your efforts, that's the area that you're going to improve. So because we don't write every day, because we're not used to writing, we just write once in a while, that's why it gets a little bit harder, okay? So my step 3 for you guys to improve your writing skills, it's actually to write a little bit every day and make writing a habit. And of course, you don't have to write a book every day, right? I don't think I want to write a book, even in Portuguese. So what I'm gonna tell you is that you can start with small steps. So start writing your own text messages without using the translator, the Google Translator. And a very good exercise for writing, it's journaling. So journaling is when you have like a notebook and then you just write on it every day. You can write whatever you want. You can write about your day. You can write about gratitude. So the way I do it, I have a small notebook. It's here. I'll show you guys. I need to buy another one as well because this is full. So I have my little notebook and this is like my journal. So every single day, I'll show you a little bit here what I do. So every single day, I write like some gratitude. So I put like the day, and then I write like some gratitude things that I'm thankful for. And then I make my to-do list as well. So this is like a journal. So this is the writing practice. And this is really gonna help you to get more familiar with writing. Because if you never do it, and then suddenly you just wanna write something very difficult, like an article for school, or something very like academic English, but you're not used to write even your text messages, that's gonna get really complicated. You wanna go from like step 0 to step 10 in one attempt. So that's quite hard to do, right? So the more you practice, the better you get. So write your own text messages, write a journal a little bit every day. If you don't know how to write or what to write, just write something that happened to you during your day. So write about the way you're feeling, write about a situation, write about your day at work, write about your dreams, write about your goals, your plans, your activities. So start with small tasks and then just make the writing activity a habit. So your brain is gonna get more familiar with English writing. And you can start writing even the simple things in English. For example, if you have to go to the supermarket, if you have to go shopping like groceries, start writing your shopping list in English. So instead of writing the items of your list in your first language because it's easier, start writing them in English. So I always make my grocery shopping list in English. When you are, for example, planning your week, planning your activities, planning your to-do list, things that you have to do, like I have here, like my to-do list, very small. This is for just for today. So when you actually have like your to-do list, start writing your to-do list in English. So this way, your brain starts to get more familiar with English writing. If you have like post-its, like sticky notes, if you have some notes that you have to write around, like I have here like my notes, like more important things that I have to do, I start writing everything in English because that's how I get more vocabulary, and this is how I get more used to. Something funny that sometimes happens to me, depending on what I'm doing at the time, sometimes I start writing in English, and then in the middle, when I realize I'm writing in Portuguese, or vice versa, sometimes I'm writing something in Portuguese, and then when I realize, I start writing in English. So it's like, it's really tricky because that's how my brain works. If I'm speaking Portuguese with someone and then I have to go back and writing, I automatically start writing in the same language that I was speaking before. And that's a good sign. It shows that you can switch, right? Your brain can change a little bit. Let me just check my notes and then I can see if I'm not forgetting anything. Yeah, so I would say like, don't use the translator even for your messages. Really try to put some effort on it. Start small, so start writing down the things from your daily life. Start writing your grocery shopping list in English. Start doing your journaling exercise every single day. So get your brain to be familiar to the English writing, okay? And then slowly you start to improve. Another tip that I can give you guys, if you need to improve your writing quickly because you have to take an exam, like a Cambridge exam or like an IELTS exam, for example, or if you're applying for university and you have to write something more academic, I would say focus on the structure of that activity. So for example, if I think about writing for Cambridge exam and writing for IELTS exam, they are both like English tasks, but the structure of the writing is different, okay? So sometimes it's not about the vocabulary and the grammar that you're writing. Sometimes it's about the structure that they expect you to follow. And that's why it's so important to do some research, to get some templates, and to try to reproduce them, because you need to learn the structure, okay? Even if we think about IELTS, if we only think about the IELTS test, there are two different types of tests. There is the academic IELTS and the general English IELTS. So if you think about the writing task of the academic writing, the first task, you have to describe a graph. So they give you a graph, like a pie chart or like just like a regular chart, and you have to describe the information, like if it's increasing or decreasing. So you have to know this specific vocabulary to describe that. But if you are taking the general English IELTS, task number 1 of the writing test, it's actually to write a letter. So writing a letter, there is nothing to do with describing a chart, right? So it's not even knowing how to write, it's to understand the task, it's understanding what they expect from you. Task number 2 is an essay. So as an essay, they expect you to follow a structure. So you need like introduction and conclusion. But if you are writing a letter and if you are describing a chart, you don't need introduction and conclusion. So even though you know how to write in English, you need to know what you are writing and what's the goal and what's the final product. Because if you don't know that, you can be the best writer in the world, you can write many books in English, but if you don't answer what they expect you to answer, you're not gonna pass the test, right? You're not gonna get a good score. So it's very important to study the structure that you need. If you're taking like any other types of tests, if you're doing like TOEFL, or if you're doing like CELPIP or PT, every single test has a different structure, right? If you are at university, depending on what you're going to write, if you're writing an article, it's different if you're writing a scientific paper, right? If you're writing the news, if you're like a journalist and you're writing like some news for a blog, the blog structure is different from a LinkedIn post, for example. So even in your first language, you would have to think about that. And in English is the same thing, okay? So keep practicing, start small, start with small tasks, and then you start to improve slowly. Something very important as well when you are writing and when you are actually studying for a test is get someone to check, get like a teacher or someone who can actually correct your writing and show you the mistakes that you're making. Because sometimes when we are making the mistakes, we don't see them. So it's very important to have like a double check. And then something that I want to say as well, that I took notes here. Sometimes if we find something difficult in our first language, we carry that to the second language. So for example, myself personally, I don't like writing. Like I just don't like it. You know, like I don't like it. I love speaking, as you guys can tell, I love talking, but I don't like writing, even in Portuguese, which is my first language. So I remember when I took my Portuguese test in 2010, maybe. I did, you know, like if you're from Brazil, you know ENEM. It's like after high school test, whatever. It's like everything that you learn at school, like how to write essays, mathematics, chemistry, history, geography. It's like everything in one test is insane. Like I don't see the point for that. And then you can use that to join universities, pretty much. So I did that. And then I remember at that time, I think the minimum score was like 500, was like half. So I remember my essay, like my writing activity, I got maybe like 540. It was like almost minimum. And that was my first language. But because I speak Portuguese, it doesn't mean that I know how to write in Portuguese, right? While my mathematics test, for example, it was like 900 something, like 945 or 50, whatever. So what's the SAT test? SAT? So I don't like writing, even in my first language, even in Portuguese, I don't like writing. And one of my friends, Paloma, she is a journalist and she loves writing. She's like content creator, like copywriting stuff. She's really good at writing. So when I have to write something long, I just ask her. I talk to her, like we actually have like a phone call or I record audios. I explain every single detail for her and then she writes it. And I was like, wow, that's like magic, you know, like I am not good at writing. So in English, I carry that with me. Like I don't like writing in English, but sometimes I have to write in English, right? If I'm taking a test or something like that, I am going to study specifically for that test, right? Because that's the way it works. But it's not my preference. Even like speaking, I prefer to speak English than to write in English. My student Fernanda, she's a scientist. She writes very well. Like, she's so good at writing. She's been doing this for many years. She writes better scientific papers than I do because I am not a scientist, right? I've never had to write scientific papers besides my university, but I am not an academic person, right? So this is not my area. This is not my expertise. So even though she's my student, her writing is much better than mine, right? Because she's been doing this for many years, but she looked for me to improve her speaking and her confidence. So I can definitely help her with that, right? Same thing, for example, for IELTS. Even though I don't like writing, I had to study writing specifically for IELTS because I had to take the test. So today I can help people with that. I can help people with their IELTS skills. But when people look for me for like PT or CELPIP or other exams, I say, oh, I'm sorry, but I cannot help you with that because I've never taken this test. And it's not the same, right? I cannot help with Cambridge. I cannot help with TOEFL because I've never done it. The only one that I know, it's IELTS because that's the one that I studied and that's the one that I am prepared for. So knowing English, it's not a guarantee. It's not like, it doesn't guarantee that you can actually write or that you can actually do any other types of task, okay? And usually when you actually like, when you know your focus, it's easier for you to practice that point, okay? Does it make sense? Let me just check my notes. See if I forgot something. Yeah, so usually when you have something that you find difficult in your first language, imagine, for example, public speaking. Public speaking and job interviews. I'll use 2 examples in one. So if you think about public speaking, like presentations, and if you think about job interviews, even in your first language, it's hard, right? So even when I was a teacher back in Brazil, I also had to take some courses for like public speaking, communication, oratory, even in my first language, because that's not something that I was naturally good at. So even in my first language, I had to create some strategies to improve. So today I use the same strategies for English, right? So if we think about that, if we think that job interviews are hard, even in our first language, imagine in a second language. So we usually carry these issues for our second language, okay? So when you have like a hard time with English, ask yourself like, oh, would I have the same problem in my first language? Maybe yes, right? Maybe no. And then you know if your problem is really English, or your problem is just like a matter of practice, of strategies in different areas as well, okay? And something very important that I also wrote here to mention to you guys, because I don't like writing. Even in Portuguese, which is my first language, I always ask someone to review my content. So even if I write something in Portuguese, I ask someone to review, someone who knows more Portuguese than me, because I make a lot of mistakes. Even in Portuguese, I make so many mistakes. You know, like, oh, is this like S or cedilha, right? Like, oh, like, should I put a comma here or not? Like, oh, what about this verb? Like, am I repeating the words? Like, can I use like a synonym or something like that? So it's always important to ask someone, okay? And in English, it's the same thing. When I write something in English, of course, not all the time, because that's gonna get annoying. But for example, posts on Instagram, I just post it. I don't ask people to check. But if I'm writing something like an important document, or if I'm writing, for example, my website, I am rewriting my website now, and I'm struggling because I don't like writing. Even the Portuguese version and the English version, I always ask someone to proofread, because that's really important. It's like, it's not really something that I can just leave some mistakes there, right? And sometimes it just passes, like sometimes we just don't really see it. Cool? Awesome. So let me just read your comments. Let me know if I have any questions. Let me know if that helps. SATs are students' academic skills used for admissions in USA. Ah, okay. I don't know much about the USA, to be honest. I know in USA they accept TOEFL as well, but I'm not sure if it's for academic. IELTS, I know they have the two options. They have IELTS academic English, they have IELTS general English. I know TOEIC is a good certification in English for people who want to work in businesses. So it's more like a professional certificate. CELTA, TESOL, and TFL, it's more like for teachers, English teachers. So I get the TEFL. That's the one that I chose to get the certificate. Cambridge, it's also good to prove your English level. So they have like FCE, which is level 5. It's more like I would say more like FC, it's more like a B2 level, more like an upper intermediate level. CAE, it's more like a C1 level, it's more like advanced level. And CPE, it's more like for teachers proficient level, C2. So there are lots of certificates that you can get if you want to prove your English level. And all of them, any certificate that you want to get or that you have to get, there is a writing task. So yeah, that's the annoying part of it. Do you think we should turn off the automatic keyboard? It is good. Like, it depends. Like, I don't like when the keyboard changes my words automatically, but I like when it shows suggestions because that helps you to know when you're writing something wrong. But if it's just automatic keyboard, like it changes instantly, that's not good because then you don't really know when you're making mistakes, right? You just get into the lazy mode again. So if you can use the English keyboard and not leave it automatically, but just leave the suggestions, that works better. That was the question from Aline. All right. Proofread. I'm just going through the comments. What are your thoughts about the automatic? Oh yeah, that's the question. So Priscilla is saying awesome tips, thank you. G is saying TOEFL is for masters, for example. Yeah, so here in Australia, they don't use TOEFL as much as in the United States. In Canada, they also use IELTS. Of course, if you have TOEFL, some universities, they accept if you already have it. They usually give you the option, right? But I would say IELTS, I've seen more opportunities to use IELTS. That's why this is the one that I chose, because I can use IELTS in more places, I would say. But I've taken general English IELTS. So all the time I was taking general English because it's more for like immigration than academic. If I want to apply for like a master's or a PhD, I'll have to take the academic or any other certificate that they ask for. Sometimes even like the university that you're applying, sometimes they offer their own English exam. They do like a type of interview with you, and then you can actually take their exam and you can just do it. You don't have to take like another exam. Awesome. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this live. I really hope the tips help you. And remember to, I think the main thing is remember to make the writing activity a habit, because in general, we are not so used to write stuff, right? We are more like speaking than actually writing. So just make this like a little habit, little writing activities every day, and then your brain starts to get more familiar and it stops being like an obligation, like, oh no, I have to write something now. So just make this like small steps every single day. Cool. And tomorrow we are back. I forgot what class is tomorrow, but I think it's grammar. So I'll just double check and then I'm gonna post here on my stories. But tomorrow at 9:17 Sydney time, we have our lesson number 4, which I'm pretty sure it's grammar. So we're going to talk about grammar. Do you think that grammar matters when you actually want to speak English? Or do you think grammar is not that important? So we're going to talk about that, and I'll give you some tips to improve your grammar as well. Okay, cool. So I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.